Ginosar, Matania.
Years ago, the State of Israel was created. The Palestine Post, which today is the Jerusalem Post, first page on that day is duplicated here. The Ben Gurion statement and so forth. There is one statement here, little story. Egyptian Air Force Spitfires bombed Tel Aviv, one shot down. I was there, I'll never forget it. I was in my underground base. Suddenly we are hearing tremendous amount of noise. So we're running on the roof and we see Spitfire, and you could see the Egyptian almost at ground level moving towards Tel Aviv. I ran immediately to my laboratory to get a machine gun, but of course they are so fast, I couldn't get it. I can see it so clearly today as this airplane. The war started 60 years ago. My association with Israel started more like 200 years ago. My family is going at least that length 200 years ago, in Tzfat mostly. And I joined the Israeli underground, the Lehi or the Stern gang, when I was 15. That was supposed to be the most feared underground organization at the time. And I participated with non-combat activity because I was technical man, so they didn't want to send me to. Unfortunately, a large number of my friends died at that time. About a quarter of my friends died in Israel during those years of 47, 47, 48, 49, and so forth. And later I joined a kibbutz near Gaza on the Israeli side, and they continued to kill us, although we didn't do anything to them. We were on the Israeli side. They ambushed us and killed some of my friends. Later I taught Yemenite, new immigrants to Israel. I taught them Hebrew. And then I joined the Israeli Air Force, worked on transmitters, receiver, and things of that nature. And then I eventually went to the United States to study electronics. I did not want to stay in the United States, but the agreement with my wife was such that she negated on her agreement, and the question was whether I leave the kids here or go by myself to Israel, and I thought my family come first, so I stay here. It was an agony, and it took me 10 years to make the decision. After that, I went and studied electronics, and I was a teaching assistant at MIT, and then I studied more electronics, got more degrees, management, and so forth. And I work for the United States military as a civilian, design military equipment of different types. And then I felt it's enough time to spend for military activities, and I went back to UCLA and got my doctorate in environmental science. I wanted to do more towards the environment, and later I became the head of the solar office and the wind energy program for the state of California. And we were very successful in putting wind energy on the map. And after several years there, I decided something more important come up, and that was nuclear disarmament. I was very concerned that the United States will escalate the nuclear arms race so much that eventually, between the stupidity of our government, the stupidity of the Russian government, one of us will make a mistake and will blow the world. So I spent 10 years working for nuclear disarmament, essentially without any income. We didn't go to movies, we didn't go to restaurants, and a few other things. We didn't buy any shirts for this time, for these 10 years. It was an interesting period. And then I went back after the collapse of the Russian Empire, the USSR. I went back to my core, which is Judaism, started to teach Judaism in my temple, which is in Israel. And I taught a number of courses, and I feel that the thing that I want to impress on you, there are people that try to position my thoughts when they read, that for the last 8 years I write about monthly review of the Israeli situation of the Middle East. And I send it to point a few friends of mine, and it's also available on the web from a British site, Zionism on the web. Anyhow, basically it's very hard to categorize me. Some people say you're on the left, some people say on the right. I was in nuclear disarmament, then I was in the Israeli underground, fighting the British, the shelters and so forth, working for military, working for peace. What I want to say is that most, if not all my training, all my life, I use the basic Jewish idea of try to find truth, try to find facts, try to do the thing which is right. Don't do the thing which is just pleasurable to you or good for you or whatever. Try to think what's important to society. And that's what I'm trying to do. So when I write something about Israel, what I'm talking about today, some people will think I'm on the left, some people think I'm on the right, some people think, who knows, I'm in the middle. But what I try to do, I try to think carefully through the issue, I try to understand what's going on. Many of the things that I wrote, I did not publish because after looking at them, I did not feel I can identify, or did not make enough sense. And my dear wife always edited, and she can tell me, shake her head and say, what are you trying to say? I said, I don't know myself. So I try to be careful in what I say. I don't know how successful I'll be here. Let me try to tell you a little. The subject is basically, can we have a two-state in the area that is now considered Israel and Palestine together, depending on who you talk to? And it's a very difficult question because all Israelis want peace. I did not meet yet one that want to have a war there. I just came from Israel. I was there about 2 months ago. And I was impressed by the peace of mind that they have. Underneath the surface, they probably don't have as much peace of mind as I think. But when you look at the country, when you look at their activities, there's so much energy, there's so much capability. It's simply extremely fascinating to watch. Wherever you go, they're building new roads, new bridges. Train pretty soon will go, I don't know how soon, but into a lot. It's already past Beersheba. You can go in very modern train any place in the country. And they think carefully about what to do with the transportation, what to do on some of the trains go underneath the ground, not to cause too much noise if it's too much close to the city. Despite all the difficulties, despite all the problems, for example, I was in Jerusalem, suddenly I heard machine guns not far from us. I said, what's going on? He said, my relative told me, if in Israel, you do not pay attention unless you know they're shooting at you. And I have to ignore it, because it's probably somebody who was training. By the way, Jerusalem, part of my story there, I couldn't believe the size of Jerusalem. Remember, I was in Jerusalem now in 1948. I was arrested by the British and escaped. I didn't escape, they released me. I was arrested by the Israeli in order to eliminate our underground. They took all members of our ground, put it in jail. I escaped from there, and I lived in Jerusalem for a while. In 1 hour, I could walk from one side of Jerusalem to another. I was standing someplace on one corner of Jerusalem this time, and I took a movie, slowly, and that was a little corner, and it was huge. It's the biggest city in Israel, both population space. It's equivalent to the size of Paris, approximately. And that's a huge city. And I thank God that every prime minister, no matter it's left, right, whatever, is building and building and building. It's within Israel. It doesn't take any property from anybody else. It doesn't belong to anybody else. And this idea that they are ruining, the possibility of peace because they are building, it's nonsense. But let's talk about something that I think is very important and it's missing in the Western world, and also especially among Jews, and especially among liberal Jews. I don't want to say anything negative about liberal Jew because I consider myself essentially also a liberal Jew. But I try to be sensible in the way I look at things. I don't say because I'm liberal, therefore no matter what I'm here, or whatever. I look at every issue. For example, I'll just throw something in. I have a doctorate in environmental science, and I fought very much against nuclear power station. I changed my mind when I realized that it was the wrong decision that I made many years ago and fought for nuclear, against nuclear power station. There are bigger problems, so I'm trying to see things practically. And one of the things that we don't see, those of us that consider themselves liberal, is we don't understand the people that we are dealing with there in the Middle East. Is that working?
Yes.
Do
You
you
hold
hear
the
me?
mic too close.
The microphone's too close.
You're holding the
Do you-
microphone too close.
Okay, right now, is it okay?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, good. So now I can hear myself. The problem is that we do not realize, just because we in the West learn over some hundreds of years, slowly, not very easily. We have many wars, we kill one another on left and right in Europe for hundreds of years, but we learn to be, let's say, a little more civilized. And we think that if I have a certain point of view, I'm in the West, everybody in the world thinks like us. If you look around your own life, you'll see when people start to talk, they assume that the listener understands them, have the same background, and they can reach some kind of an agreement. It's understandable when you come from the same place. But it's quite different when you're dealing with people in the Middle East, when you're dealing with Arabs. I want to make it very clear. If I was born an Arab, or if I was at my infancy moved to live among the Arabs, I'll behave exactly like them. And if you take any Arabs from there and bring them to live with Western people, they'll behave like Western people. There's nothing inherently diabolical about the Arabs or anything like this. The culture is the problem. We cannot understand the culture of the Arabs. It's impossible for Western people to understand. Let me give you two examples, one before and one now. I met Abba Ibn many years ago. We had a small discussion and it was absolutely fascinating. His brain, he understood Judaism and the breadth of Jewish history marvelously. He made a statement that everybody knows. The Palestinian cannot miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. What happened is he did not understand who he's dealing with. He came from Western civilization. He was raised in some of the best universities in the English culture in London and England. He came from South Africa. And he was a very highly intellectual individual. He could not understand how the Arabs think. From their point of view, it wasn't missing opportunity at all. You know, Vladimir Putin is now the Prime Minister of Russia, but he's the one that controls what's going on. Recently, I have a lot of regard for him, not that I like him, but I know that he's an extremely smart fellow. But I didn't understand that essentially he's not very smart at all. What he said a few days ago, it was stunning to me. He said, I don't know what they are worried about the Iranians. Of course they will not bomb the Israelis. They'll kill half the Palestinians there. Why would they do a thing like that? He doesn't understand. First of all, the Iranian happen to be Sunnis. Israeli Arab happen to be, Shiites. Israeli Arab are Sunnis. They don't love one another very much. Second, the total attitude of the world Arabs, if I try to kill the Israelis, and you die in the process, an Arab neighbor and so forth, you are going to heaven because you are now a very important man in the fight for our freedom. The Arabs don't think the same way that we think when we see, for example, one of the most important things in Judaism, the Shabbat, which is the most important holiday, is set aside the minute there's a danger to any human life, no matter what it is. Human life is the most sacred. And there are a lot of commandments against doing anything of that nature, interfering with human life, killing people and so on. But it's not the same thing in the Arab world. Now, we need to think how they live because it's so foreign to us. Think about an Arab child born in such a way, there's no love. there's tremendous amount of a child which is 4 or 5 years old can tell his mother what to do because the man is the one in control. There's very little love. There's domination in the family. There's tremendous amount of intimidation. The one on the top, the one with the money, usually is the older fellow, is the one to tell everybody what to do. If you study the Arab culture, you realize that anybody, unless they have unique characteristic, will fall into the trap and fall into the culture of hate and so forth that simply is ununderstandable. We cannot grasp the kind of thing. I think I probably was 17, 18 years old. I was in an Arab city, Jaffa. Actually, within a few months I was across the street in a jail. They caught me, but at that time I didn't know. So I was there in the marketplace, and suddenly, full of Arab merchants and so forth, suddenly about 7 Arabs, about almost my height, start jumping me and trying to take my wallet and trying to hit me. Luckily, and all the Arab merchants were right there. Everybody was laughing. Nobody was trying to help me. Nobody was kind. So it's the middle of the day, in a public place. Luckily, my friend was not far from me and he saw it, and he was very used to the Arabs, so he came back and threatened them, and all of them ran away. But this is very typical. King Hussein tried to tell the leader of Israel. He met with Prime Minister Shamir, that was the longest serving Prime Minister, and I knew him personally, met him a number of times. He was the head of our underground. Outstanding man. So King Hussein, the previous king that just died several years ago, in Jordan, told Prime Minister, and he said, you have to understand that the Arab admire leaders that are completely different than yours. You have to understand that the normal Arab admire Saddam Hussein immensely. Why? To you, cruelty, killing people and intimidating people is bad. The Arabs feel very good and very respectful of a leader that can do this thing and not worry about it. That's what King Hussein said. So he said, you must understand that what to you seems completely un-Western, what to you seems completely unacceptable, is what the Arab in the street admit as a good characteristic and what they admire in their leader. So Saddam Hussein warned us. He said, Arab leader must exert fear in order to lead. They have to admire them because of their strength, their ability to kill at will, to fire at will, to do what they want, and they have to be afraid of them. That's what an Arab leader. The president of Egypt, Mubarak, several years ago said, when everybody thought, let's go and liberate Iraq and make them democracy, he said, you don't understand what's happening in the Arab world. If you bring democracy to the Arab world, we'll kill one another. You cannot bring democracy to the Arab world without power. Egypt is controlled by absolute ruler, Mubarak. Jordan is controlled by the kingdom and few people around them. Saddam Hussein, of course, controls Iraq. In Iran, which is the most liberal, if you want to call it from a democracy point of view, it's extremely well controlled, and if you do anything, you go to jail, and if you carry a Bible or a New Testament, you go to jail, and you may be even killed. So, of course, Syria, you cannot say the same thing about Turkey, because you have to remember Turkey is not an Arab country, it's a Muslim country. Okay? But they don't understand and they don't look at life the way we look at life. It's intimidation, it's power, and so on. With all the things they did to Israel, with all the things they did to kill so many of my friends, I cannot feel anger or hate towards the Arabs. And I did not see it in Israel. The Israeli guys want peace. They don't know what to do. everybody in my family that was on the left is not on the left anymore. I was so surprised to hear the argument. The left, it was quite prominent until a few years ago in Israel, doesn't exist because they said, what do? We have nobody to talk to. We gave them Gaza, and look what they're doing. We left Lebanon, what Barak did in the year 2000, Prime Minister Barak, and he said, instead we got the Hezbollah there and the attack in 2006 that I don't remember how many thousands rocket shot against northern Israel. So the problem is, what do you do with these kind of people, the Israeli says? And from the Israeli point of view, you add what's happened now in Iran, and their desire to wipe Israel off the map, it makes a tremendous amount of agony. But there is something within Israel which is fascinating. They know all of this trouble, but they don't say, God help us, and hide. They continue to build the country, they continue to build the military, they continue to exercise, as you heard 2 weeks ago, over the Mediterranean. 100 aircraft went 900 miles, which is about the distance to Iran, to demonstrate force, to try to show the Iranian that in case of trouble, Israel have enough aircraft, enough capability to get there. The Israelis don't want war. The hate to war is so intense, and that's what the Arabs are using. I met some Israelis, and I'm a soldier, and it was fascinating to talk to that soldier. In one respect, he wanted to fight in Gaza because he said it's not acceptable, we cannot have anything like this. But his compassion to the Arab was amazing to me. He said, here's the role that I have to operate as a soldier. If there's an Arab guy with a Molotov cocktail that's about to throw Molotov cocktail on me and kill me, I can shoot him. If he take the cocktail, put it down on the ground, I cannot shoot him anymore. He can grab it again, but no, he's not a threat to me. The rule that I have to operate as a soldier is such, I cannot shoot at anybody until they're either about to kill me. Now you're talking about a fraction of a second between who will shoot whom. But that's the difficulty the Israelis are working. Not only because it is the law of the military. The Israelis and Jews in general, as you know, hate the idea of killing somebody. It was a very interesting exercise in our temple about 5 years ago. General from the Air Force, the Israeli Air Force came and said, okay, people are angry, the Israeli are killing some civilians when they go and attack station in Gaza. But you have to understand how it's being done. He said, here it is, I'll give you an example. We know there's a car with 4 terrorists going out towards the border, and they'll try to probably kill 25 Israelis. Should we shoot them? There are several children and Arabs, civilians around it. And he gave the question to us to make the decision, and he said the decision by the Israeli pilots to do their thing is considerably more concerned about civilians than we in the United States are. Which means the Israelis themselves do not want to go and kill or do anything of that nature, not because it's by command, because it's against their culture, it's against their basic philosophy. So what do? 20 years ago was the first Intifada. It was 1988. I was there. It was not so critical at the time. They threw rocks there. It did not shoot very much. But it started the culture that says Israel should be eliminated. We need to take all of Israel. For 20 years, the Arab children, from the time they are born, and all the youngsters are hearing the same thing. It's not a two-state solution they are talking about. We are talking about we need to eliminate the Jews. Now, I was privy, if you want to call it, for this propaganda during the 1947, 48, 49 period, how they demonized the Israelis, but this is nothing compared to what happened in the last 20 years. Before Arafat came, after Arafat came, the mistake they did in 1993 to sign the peace agreement and give Arafat and the PLO to control of the total country, the first thing that he did was to brainwash everybody in his which means there were something like 2.5 million Palestinians. And he did it very systematically by radio, by television, by street meeting, by religious leaders, on the streets. So when you go to an Arab area, during these years you are seeing a tremendous amount of propaganda against the Jews that is Nazi-like. Compare the Jews to monkeys, they compare the Jews to rats, they compare the Jews to any kind of a thing that the Germans use. They use the same propaganda they could find from them. The idea is not that we want our share of the land, wherever we live, but we want to take the total land. This is one norm, this is not the question. The question is, what do you do with people that for 20 years, which means everybody born after 1988, everybody was young at that time, so basically half the population was brainwashed against the possibility of peace with the Jews and with Israelis. It's a very, very difficult situation. You cannot, there's a lot of testing was done, and I saw some brain research on public television not long ago, and he said, when you repeat a lie, you remember what Hitler used to have a lie, I think Goebbels said it, if you make the lie big enough and you repeat it long enough, people will believe in it. That's what happened to the German people. The same thing happened to the Arab people. For 20 years and more, they're hearing all the time tremendous amount of hate against the Jews, demonizing the Jews. How do you change a culture of that nature? You cannot come and make a decree. It's extremely very difficult. It's very difficult to change the culture. You remember that Moses, some 3,500 years ago or more, realized after a short time in the desert that these slaves would not be able to fight their way into Israel. And he said, we'll have to work for 40 years in the desert until this generation disappears. We'll have a new generation with more freedom, and the other one will conquer Israel. And there is a danger that it will take that length of time. But how will you change the Arabs of today within the Palestinian area if you leave them to the kind of leaders they have now, like Hamas and other? It will not be changed. We need somebody, somebody like Sadat. You remember Sadat of Egypt. He was a man of unique characteristics. He did not care about himself. He did not have an ego to speak of compared for leaders. He said, I know I will die in the process, but what I want to do is to change the culture of the Egyptians from war towards peace. I tried several times, we and the leaders before him, tried several times to wipe Israel. He said, we cannot do it militarily. Let's try and have peace with it. And of course, he was killed within a relatively short time after that because of his courage. When you look at the Arab world, right now, it seems to me that either you'll have leaders like Mubarak, which is not so bad, depending how you look at it, from what point of view. King of Jordan, Syria, of course, is quite a dictator in a very poor country. Wherever you go, it seems to me, only a dictator can survive there. Because without dictatorship, as much as we don't like it, democracy cannot really survive. We have Iraq, and people say, yeah, we have a democracy there. It's a democracy that we sacrifice our youth. By now, 3,500 or more of our young men died in Iraq in order to help them to get democracy, and will stay there for the next few years. My view is that in order to have a two-state solution, the first thing that they have to do somehow they have to develop a leader that really cares for his people. They would not find anybody like Yitzhak Shamir. Yitzhak Shamir was a man without ego. I knew him, and I learned about him, and I read about him, and he was one of the unique. I think he was somewhat similar, not quite, Ben Gurion. Ben Gurion was not as good as him. There were very few leaders in any country. I think FDR may have been good leader. Truman might have been leader. General Eisenhower was the leader without a lot of ego and self-centered and interest to do something to, they really wanted the best for the United States, and the other leader wanted the best for their own country, from Sadat, Shamir, and others. Leader of that nation must be found, developed, and come within from the Arab culture itself. Without this kind of a leader, without dictatorship that really is on more fanatic like the one in Iraq and the one in Iran. But somehow out of this milieu, there has to come a leader that cares for his people, maybe several leaders, and are willing to lead the people to some harmony and willingness to accept Israel. Because right now, Israel is completely unacceptable to the Arab world, and will continue to be so until some internal change, and we cannot impose this change. Thank you.